morning, everyone. This is Kathy Mason from MasonWorks Marketing here on Conscious Business Zone with my new friend, Robert Cornett. Hi, Robert.
Hello. Hi.
I'm so glad that you're here. So I am very lucky that I got to meet Robert from the IANDS 2023 IANDS Conference, which is going to be held near Washington, D.C. at the end of August and the first part of September. And it's also going to be available online for you people that are interested in learning about death and dying and the beauty and the natural cycle of it all. So Robert is an actor and playwright and holds a master's degree from Harvard Divinity School. And so he's also a death doula, an end of life doula, death doula, and he works with hospice patients and their families in New York State. So what I'm excited to learn about is first of all your journey from divinity school to what you're doing now. So could you just help us understand your path and so that we can follow along with you?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Kathy, for inviting me. And this is a great opportunity. Hello to everybody. Blessings, actually. Yeah, I just my whole spiritual awakening actually happened fairly early in my college years. And I was almost instantly, as I heard about spiritual experiences, esoteric writings, anthroposophy, William Blake, Emanuel Swedenborg, those things all just captured my attention, but also what they were saying just felt like it was correct. I kind of got it right away. I didn't question it. Reincarnation, when I heard about it, I just felt like, yeah, I've been here before. I have a sense of that. And then I had some spiritual experiences actually involved with theater work that I did in college, some ensemble theater work where I felt like a spiritual presence came to me and helped me shape a character in a play that I was working on. So all that led me to want to explore further and think about all this stuff and understand it. So I applied and got into Harvard Divinity School. I didn't have a religious orientation, so I wasn't going there to be a minister. I just wanted to learn. And they had this terrific program connected with the Center for the Study of World Religions there, where you could study all the religions and basically create your own study plan. So I did that. I studied all the world religions and indigenous religions. And what I found myself wanting to do, almost all my papers were about conceptions of the afterlife. How did these various religions think about this? And what was the Orthodox teaching? But more importantly, what were mystical experiences that were being described in these traditions about the extension of consciousness after death? And so that has stayed with me even back then. This was all the way back in the 1980s when I was in divinity school. And even back then I had heard about the hospice movement, which was relatively new. And I always said, I would love to do that at some point. So fast forward to my 60s, after, work in holistic education, teaching a whole system of body, mind, spirit education to teachers and counselors. I went into the corporate world to do human resources and organizational training, but I always kept this desire to know more and learn more. And the past 10 years, when I turned 60, 10 years ago, I felt like I was called to go even deeper into this, to get involved with hospice and also to really understand, where do we go when we die? What happens? Because I think in modern Western culture, none of us have, at least I didn't, certainly growing up in church and even in divinity school, there was no roadmap. There was no image that I could work work with other than some of the texts I was reading from other cultures that would kind of guide you and actually guide you at the end of your life to prepare you for that. So I've spent a lot of time thinking about it, writing, talking to people, doing some talks and workshops where people can explore how to prepare for death, how to contemplate death, how to think about death in a culture that really avoids death, that denies it, that doesn't really want to accept the continuation of consciousness. At least our modern medical system doesn't accept that. So one of the things I realized in all of this was there has been a concerted effort from spirits on the other side of the veil to communicate to us here in incarnation about the other side, to let us know that it's there and that we have access to it in this life, in the physical world. And they've been doing this for in a concerted effort. I feel like it was a plan and they had steps that they were taking. And if you go back 200 years to the 1800s, especially in Western civilization, and especially in the US and Europe, you saw the emergence of things like the Transcendentalist movement with Emerson and Thoreau and the Alcotts. And they were getting their ideas actually from Hinduism, from the concept of the oversoul. And they were teaching about that. And then the spiritualist movement started at that time as well and continued into the 1900s, where many, many people started to have experiences of deceased relatives communicating to them from the other side. And so that began to be studied. The Society for Psychical Research emerged in the late 1800s, and you had people like William James, who were reputed scholars, and other reputed people actually getting involved in psychic research. One of whom was a guy named Frederick Myers, who studied this deeply and wrote about the human personality and the survival of death. When he died in 1903, I think about 10 years later, he communicated his experiences of the afterlife. And it's a wonderful book that's been published by Geraldine Cummins about that. It's called The Road to Immortality. And he explained everything that he was experiencing and outlined it and talked about the different levels that he was going through after death. And then back in that time, also in the 1800s, there were all these utopian communities that all had a spiritual motivation, and they were trying to bring out a new way of living, a more cooperative, communal way of living. The Shakers, the Oneida community, the Mormons were part of this, Christian Science, the New Thought movement. It was just the late 1800s and early 20th century were just filled with this desire to understand and know. The spiritual movement at its height in the early 1900s had over 8 million people involved in it, just in the US and the UK.
Wow.
Well, and showing you how hungry people were in the industrial age to feel like something was happening. And World War II created a lot of interest. World War I created a lot of interest because all these young men were dying, and these horrific deaths, and people wanted to know where they were. And there were a lot of communications that were coming directly from soldiers who had died in the war, some of whom were lost, kind of like earthbound souls. They didn't even know they were dead. And mediums and other clairvoyants who could work at that level and on those planes started playing roles where they would contact those souls and let them know that they actually were dead and they needed to continue to find their way towards the light and let go of the earthly plane. So anyway, those are some of the things that I've been spending a lot of time thinking about and studying. All of this, I think, has been culminating. The same impulse from the other side, I'd say, was culminating in the 1970s and beyond, when Raymond Moody and other researchers came out with their near-death experiences. and documenting those and studying those. And for 50 years now, we have thousands and thousands of stories, anecdotal and also veridical experiences that really indicate that people are out of their bodies. They have a medical crisis, they're out of their bodies, they see what's going on, they hear what's going on, and then they actually enter another dimension and have experiences, which my understanding of it is it's a glimpse. I think Raymond Moody called one of his books a glimpse of heaven. So they're just touching into like the beginning of the post-mortem realm and having a sense of it, having an experience of that. But people who actually die and communicate through mediums and automatic writing and other sources, telepathic communications, they've gone further because they've died and they've actually go into, there's the concept in the Bible of the being taken to the third heaven. Some people talk about 7 heavens. Other people talk about 10 spheres or different dimensions of expanded consciousness, each one more and more expanded consciousness, and traveling in the afterlife to other planets. So there is a large universe out there that is waiting for us when we move on. So that's, Kathy, that's a little bit about my background.
It's wonderful.
Spiritually, and why this is so interesting and exciting to me. And I do think science is on the verge, thanks to people like IANDS and all the researchers, but also other people independently doing this work, where the fact of the soul is going to be scientifically proven, and certainly within 100 years, it will be accepted. And our whole culture and society will then, it will transform just because of that.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
in your studies, did you find that there was a indigenous concept that you felt portrayed the truth better than what we've used through religion or through philosophy? Was there any I guess myth or teachings that guided you?
Yeah, there definitely was a concept of the afterlife. People who've studied native religions, and some of the translations I think are probably not correct, because these are modern, or whatever, even Christian, anthropologists researching all of this, and they're trying to put it in language they can understand. These experiences are, you can't almost put in English in language, because they're too profound. But there's the concept of the happy hunting ground. There's the sense, which I think we really need to learn from indigenous cultures throughout the world, a sense of the ancestors actually being alive, being connected to us at all times, looking over us, being available, particularly the wise ones who have crossed over, to provide wisdom to us and help guide our lives. And Native American culture, African culture, Chinese and indigenous culture, they all, there's ancestor worship, and we kind of make fun of that now because we're all so smart, and that's so superstitious, but it's not. It's something that exists, and we need to celebrate it and open ourselves up to it, because there's much to learn from that.
Right. So I'm just wondering, it feels like we're going full circle. It feels like we're in the Dark Ages coming back to the Renaissance.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, it feels like that the pre-Egyptians were much more spiritually and technologically advanced than we give anyone credit for. We have this superiority complex about the Western world or the modern world, like, oh wow, we've got it all figured out, when they probably knew how to work with the systems of the unseen in such a profound way that hopefully we will rediscover as we go into this Renaissance. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, totally. I think, things evolve. So, but it's very important to take with you the truths and the wisdom that have gone before you. And I think we're going to go beyond, with what we can do technologically. We're going to go even beyond what the indigenous cultures did if we let ourselves explore.
Right.
And once we get that we have more intelligence than just our five senses. And especially intuition and imagination, that will lead the way. Those are our higher mind that we all have access to right now. We have intuition, we have gut feelings all the time.
Right.
We have imaginations, and these are the things when I was involved with education that we tried to teach, because I never got that. I never got that in school. That my imagination was something I could develop. Certainly I participated in things that let me, artistic things, but there's a discipline to intuition work and imagination work where it really moves you to an expanded state of awareness. And things move out from there. So yeah, I think when education starts to, and we're seeing mindfulness in the schools and that kind of thing, college courses on mindfulness, that's all great. That's the beginning, I think, of that opening. Right. But we need to go much further, and I think we need to go faster, because our planet's in trouble.
Right. Well, I think what happens too is that the opportunity to have these kind of discussions where they're not just academic, where you really get to the heart of it, and the knowledge that practice, a spiritual practice of meditation or mindfulness or prayer, however you connect, is the path to solving all of these esoteric problems that we have. Problem solving, we don't have problem solving skills that are taught in schools. And so by going to our imagination or going to higher knowing, where the expanded view of all of this, the way the game is really being played, which hopefully quantum physics will give a different perspective of it, so it'll be more accepted as well. But there's been people, the highly sensitive people, that all along have been like canaries in the coal mine.
Right.
You walk in a room and you can feel it, and you actually can feel where the darkness is and if it's attached to someone or not. I mean, that's what we're coming to now, is that I believe this whole period is a time of waking everyone up to being sensitive like that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's some of the messages that come from wiser people on the other side are basically saying what you're saying, Kathy, is that humanity is beginning to develop new abilities. Mm-hmm. Some of them were old abilities that we had before, but we've lost them, and now the time has come for us to develop those higher mind abilities that will let us, as you say, experience. And education has to be experiential. I think there's a place for book knowledge, but there has to be more experiential education that people. I mean, how can people believe this if they can't experience it?
Right.
So I do feel like that's the next step, is more and more people will be having experiences because they're meditating, because they're being taught guided visualization and other techniques that open them to. I mean, that's what opened me up. I had guided visualization experiences that I didn't even and I had this real sense of a spirit being my teacher and my guide.
Right. Oh, that's so perfect. So I agree. I think that our creation, our capability to be creative beings and co-create with consciousness at a very high level is accessed through meditation, in my experience. And then you can get to the present moment, because all the rest of this is this huge distraction from that. And I think more and more people are getting there. There's a gentleman named Bill Phillips who's got the World Tai Chi Day that's now Tai Chi and Qigong. He's been doing it, I think, 20 years. And he's got a initiative that he's created to get Tai Chi and Qigong into schools, so that kids could actually learn. I mean, they'll know when they're in sports and they're in the flow, but what if they could intend that and enact that? And that's wonderful.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Maybe we could talk about a couple of the slides that that I have, just to give people a taste of some of this may be new to people, and some may already know this who are watching. But one of my teachers, and this slide comes from his work. His name is David Spangler. You may know him, Kathy. He was one of the people in the New Age movement back in the 70s and 80s, and he's still around. I'm still learning from him. He was very involved with Findhorn community, one of the leaders there for a number of years. And he has a number of what he calls inner colleagues. I mean, from childhood, he had the experience of inner colleagues taking him on journeys and showing him other dimensions of reality outside of the earth, or connected to the earth, really, but not physical reality. And one of the things, and he's not the only one teaching this. I think it's a whole new sense that's coming about in spiritual education, is the sense that the earth is a conscious, intelligent being itself. And the word Gaia has come about through a scientist named Lovelock who talked about the Gaia principle. And David has picked up on that term as well. And there's other old terms going back to ancient times, where the soul of the planet was called the Logos, which is a Greek word for, the mind of the planet. But anyway, whatever you call it, the earth is a being, and it's been around for, millions and millions of years. And what David has found out is that a long, long time ago, before any history was ever documented, humanity made a contract. The soul of humanity itself made a contract with the earth that it would come into physical form, incarnate form, and it had a choice to do that. It didn't have to, but it chose to do that to help the soul of the planet in its own evolutionary purpose. And so part of what we're here to do in each of our individual incarnations is find a way to do that, to support that larger soul that we're all a part of. And anything we can do that provides love, blessing, healing in the world, to the human kingdom, to the plant kingdom, to the animal kingdom, all of that is part of the evolutionary work of the planet and supporting that. But he also learned from some of his inner colleagues about what is described as the post-mortem realms. That's his language for the afterlife.
Okay.
And so he talks about that when we incarnate, it's really like it's a play in 3 acts. And the first act is actually before we come into physical life. We're in the pre-birth realm, and we're actually making the decision to incarnate. And we're actually forming, with the help of elemental beings, angelic, Davic beings, who are on the other side working with us the whole time to build our physical vehicle, which is made up of etheric energy. There's physical energy, obviously, but there's etheric energy surrounding that. There's an emotional body, there's a mental body, and there's our soul body. And all these things are working together to actually come into form. And it includes, selecting our parents. And all of that's a conscious decision that we make, and that we execute with a lot of help from the other side. So that's the pre-birth realm. And some people call this the fixed design for an incarnation, what you're here to do in this particular incarnation. DK is the initials for a Tibetan that communicated through telepathically through Alice Bailey, one of the people I've learned from. And then Act 2 of incarnation is what we all experiencing right now, our physical life, and life in not just a physical body, but our life in our mental, emotional, and etheric bodies. And one thing that education doesn't pay enough attention to is it needs to develop all of those bodies, not just our minds. Physical development is important. Getting to understand the energy centers in your body is important to learn about, even as a child. Developing your emotional body and helping it to become more pure, more clean, less filled with the debris and the garbage that we end up picking up through life with all of our emotional challenges. And the mental body, which is sort of a form of a light body, that's very connected to our soul, and where we can connect with through our intuition to the higher realms. And so the third act is actually when we enter the post-mortem realm, when we make that transition and we actually shed the physical and etheric vehicle. And the Tibetans really are great teachers with all of this. And this Tibetan that communicated with Alice Bailey has a whole volume of this in one of her books about what happens when people die. But he says, actually, both at the hour of birth and at the hour of death, there is a brilliant flash of light, electric light. And at the moment of birth, the hour of birth, right before you're born, if you were clairvoyant, you could see this flash of light taking place in the mother's body and within the child that's being born. And then at the hour of death, this same brilliant flash of light happens, which is when the soul disconnects and breaks contact with the physical body, and actual life and consciousness withdraws. I've been able to sit with people who have died in hospice, and even when my parents died and my first wife died 6 or 7 years ago now. And if you sit with someone who dies, there is life there the moment before they die, and that life is gone. It's a shell. The body is a shell at that point. And just seeing that, I think, and not being afraid to see that, is an important discipline. It's an important process to take into yourself, because you begin to actually feel like, there was something really there. Grandpa was there, even though he looked feeble and he was tired and ill and, and sick and all of that. It was Grandpa. And then all of a sudden, that's not Grandpa. That's just flesh. Yeah. There's no Grandpa there. And that's what leaves. So anyway, that's just a model to think about. And then when you get to the post-mortem realms, there's just a whole other number of things that you experience. people who have near-death experiences describe a lot of these things that happen to them in the beginning of the post-mortem realm. The Christian concept of purgatory actually is a good word for what happens when you first enter the post-mortem realm. Purgatory comes from the word purge. It's a purging, it's a cleansing. And this is when you've released your emotional body and your mental body, and there's a lot of garbage in there. I mean, we can't avoid it. You know, we go through difficult times. We have sympathy and antipathy and love and hate and challenge and all that stuff we carry with us into the post-mortem world, and our personalities actually come with us, and it needs some cleaning, and a lot of times it needs healing. Some people experience in near-death experiences, and also in the spiritualist writings, that there are guides that actually take you to almost a hospice healing center in the other world, because you're kind of burnt out. You know, you're kind of you've been through a lot, and you need rest before you can even continue. And another common thing in the life review, and also is described from people who have died and then communicated telepathically, is the sense of a life review taking place. And the near-death literature and IANDS, they're all over this. They have so many documented experiences of this. But this is a chance for you to really get a sense of what the whole incarnation was about. Did you come in and meet your fixed design that you came in with? Did you achieve some of the goals that your soul had for itself? And most importantly, the major question that always gets asked in a life review: how did you increase or expand your ability to love? And it really becomes almost all about your relationships. It doesn't become about, you know, how much money you earned, or how successful you were in your career, or how much knowledge you had, how much expertise you were, you know, maybe an expert in your field. It's about relationships. How did you handle that? How did you treat people? And in some life reviews, people actually feel what the people in their lives felt from their words and behavior and actions. So it's not like you're just watching a movie. You're actually feeling what that person felt. And it's almost like one person described it, that the ripples of selfishness, egotism, whatever I was experiencing at that time, anger with someone, those ripples, they ripple through not just the person that received them, but the people that they contact. And it affects them, and it ripples through the whole social network. At the same time as kindness and love and caring for people, it ripples. It ripples right through all of the relationships that you touch, and then the people that they touch. And you actually, during the life review, can often just experience that and see that. And often what they say is that, you know, there is a sense of judgment, but there's no one judging you. It's just your soul almost looking back objectively, stepping back and seeing what happened, and almost in a matter of fact way, and saying, I could have done this better, or I did do this well, and look at the positive effect it created. So these are some of the things that happen in that post-mortem realm. One of the really interesting books, Helen Greaves wrote a book, Testimony of Light, about a friend of hers, Frances Banks, who died and went to the post-mortem realms, and described once she was a former nun who left the church and then became just an educator. But she was greeted by some of the nuns who had passed away, and they were actually taking care of her. And then what she found is that there were all these tasks and all these things you could do in the post-mortem realms. There's halls of learning, there's places of service, there's travel through different realms where you could experience different things. Music is experienced in a lot of near-death experiences where you actually feel like you're hearing the music of the spheres. and that music permeates the afterlife. Music comes from, you might see a garden or flowers, but they're singing to you. And people can pick up things that they were often, it's a period during this initial time in the postmortem realm where if there are things you wanted to do that you never felt you had time or the ability to do, that you can work on. So there's people doing artwork there, there's people writing, there's people composing music, playing music. All of these things are available for the soul to continue to do until it decides it's learned enough temporarily. And then the next place for it to go beyond just the initial postmortem realm is actually the realm of the soul, to be in the realm of the soul itself, which is pure light and pure love and pure energy. And there's continued learning there at that level as well. It's just a different frequency, of a different vibratory rate. It's very heartening to know that this might be even a possibility for us.
Okay. Should I go to the next slide?
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So one of the things I've been working on as part of my hospice work, but also just in the spiritual work that I do with some spiritual groups that I do some talks with, is how to get people to think about and get comfortable contemplating death. Actually make it a spiritual practice, a meditative practice. You don't have to spend all day doing this. It's not your only spiritual practice, but it could be one of them. And one is the simplest thing to do is to just look outside, look at nature. I'm looking out the window right now, and outside my window is a forest that is filled with cycles of life, death, and rebirth constantly. And just looking at nature and how that is, that's how the earth operates. It operates through things coming into form. And then think about a flower, how it comes into form, and then it's finished with what it can do with that particular form, and it shrivels up and dies, and it lets go of seeds, and those seeds sow the next life, the next birth. So the cycles of nature, I think, are great teachers. There is a whole spiritual practice of life review, actually. It can be done actually, what they call it, the daily evening review, where you actually take time before you go to sleep, before you're going to when you go to sleep, you go to the astral plane, and that's the beginning of the post-mortem realms, it turns out, actually. But before you actually go to sleep and enter the astral realm, look back on your day, and look objectively, not judgmentally, not kicking yourself or abusing yourself in the process, but just simply, how did my day go? Did I take care of people? Did I tell someone I loved them? Was I helpful? Was I contributing some positive energy to the world? Did I do any blessing? Was I able to bless in any way the life around me? And just acknowledge that, and take that with you into your sleep, and take that with you into your next day. And another version of that is to do a life review on your birthday annually, or every 10 years, or do all of these things. And you can create a timeline of, like, what were the major events this year? What were the major events decade by decade? So I've looked at the past, 6 decades of my life, and kind of seen, well, the first 10 years were really all about my formation and developing my body. And my dad was really into sports, and I wouldn't have been that kind of probably coordinated of a person if I wasn't constantly playing sports with him and with other kids. And also, my parents, as many issues and problems that they have, as all families have, they did provide me with a stable environment in which to grow up. And I feel very privileged and lucky for that. And that set the stage for me to be able to do my next decade and the next one, and to go to college and have an awakening during that decade of my life. And then to have a career and actually to feel like I had a calling. And what did I do with my calling? How did I treat people at work? How did I create, and my job in human resources was, how can I create a work environment that makes everyone feel important and cared about, and that they're developing their potential. They're growing and learning every day. So these kinds of things you can look back on. And when you do that, when you come to the other side and you actually have your actual life review, you've already done a lot of the work. And it should be easier and certainly less painful. Some life reviews in the afterlife are described as painful because people realize all the things that they really missed. So that's another practice to think about. Another practice, which I deal with actually with all my patients because they're actually living this. What if you only had 6 months to live? Even if you're 20 years old or 30 years old, what if you only had a year to live? How would you use that time? And that really gets you this focus to say, oh, wait a minute, what's important to me? And all of a sudden things that are unimportant start to move aside, and it makes room for what are the most important things in your life that you can do to make this a better world. So that's another exercise that people can do. And then I think everyone should also do this, certainly as you get older, is how do you want your final days and hours to go? This is what I do as an end-of-life doula with my hospice patients. And unfortunately, often they have in hospice usually only 6 months to live or less. And that's kind of late in the game to be thinking about this kind of thing, because first of all, you're not in great shape physically and emotionally, and oftentimes when you're terminally ill. And it's very hard to get that mental clarity that you might have had 10 or 20 years ago. So I encourage people to just think a little bit about it and to have a little plan. In hospice work, we come up with what's called a vigil plan for people, which is really essentially, how do you want your last 2 or 3 days to go, when it really is, the nurses and the doctors have come in and they've said, you are actively dying now. And you're in the stage, you might have 2 weeks, you might have a week, and certain physiological things start to happen that start to become clear that there only may be days left. And so I ask people to think about that with their loved ones so we can make note of it. And there's no scrambling around or guessing. People can have exactly what they want. Some of my patients want family around them and kids and a lot of activity and liveliness, and they want people to go on with their lives and not treat them like they're sick and dying. Just be with them. And I had one patient that told me that's what he wanted to do, so we set it up, and the last couple of days was just beautiful. I mean, the college kids came in, these were grandchildren. They came in with their laptops and they're doing their homework, and the little kids are crawling on the floor with their toys, and people are bringing in food to serve to each other, and people are going up and whispering in his ear and petting him on the hair and the head, and just having these loving moments with him, and exactly how he wanted his life to end. But others might want few people there. They might want it to be more sacred. They might want a candle. They might want certain incense or certain music. I find a lot of my hospice patients are drawn to harp music, and so I bring my iPad and I play harp music for them, especially people with dementia who actually aren't that communicative. But when music is played, something changes and they come alive. That part of their brain is not damaged. And it might be popular music, it might be sacred music, it could be any number of things, but something really changes in their being when music happens. And that's a real gift I think people can give to their family members who have dementia, and when it's so hard to communicate to them and they can't explain or express what's going on inside them. But my sense is they are processing the end of their life just like anyone else would be. And then you can spend time with the dying. As a hospice volunteer, that's always a great way to contemplate death, or at least spend more time than you'd like to. Just get out of your comfort box and be willing to do that once in a while. And then the sleep exercise, it's kind of esoteric, but that's a process that people do when they're falling asleep, where they actually try to remain conscious past the time when you normally would just slip away to sleep. Most of us just drift off to sleep. That's how I usually fall asleep. And, I just gradually kind of relax and let go, and then I'm sleeping. But in this sleep exercise, you try to not drift off, but to stay conscious, stay alert as you enter the astral plane and actually experience what the astral plane is. And it's not easy to do. I've tried it, but occasionally I've had glimpses of it. And it can take years of practice to do this. The Tibetan monks often practice this. And they have a whole yoga of dream yoga, as well as sleep activity. But if you can train yourself to do that, it is a way to make your transition a little easier, because it's sort of a rehearsal for leaving your body. So that's that for that slide.
Well, can I add one thing, real
Yeah, love to hear any comments.
Okay, so my first year in college, I took a class, and I don't even remember what it was. I thought it would be an easy A. So I don't know what it was, but they had us do guided meditations, and it was held in a church in an A-frame. And there were about 25 of us that were down on the floor listening to this. And the professor put us through what would happen if we died a year from now, and then brought it up to like tomorrow.
Wow.
And,
That's amazing.
and several people quit school. I mean, they realized that if they died tomorrow, this wasn't what they wanted to do. So I don't think that was the outcome he was looking for.
Right.
But it was profound. I mean, once you do that,
Yeah,
and you really have a chance to consider that, it changes your whole perspective.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the spiritual experience I actually had right after college, when I did some theater work, was exactly that, Kathy. It was an ensemble piece. So it was back in the 70s and 80s, there was a lot of experimental theater. And I just loved that. When I found out about that, I said, that's for me. I don't want to play Ibsen or traditional theater, but this was where you can actually create a play yourself, and it's not linear, it's expressionistic. And the theme of the play was about death. And the concept was every actor creates a character who's died, and then you go back and recreate parts of their life up to the moment of death, and then enact their moment of death. And that's when a spirit guide came to me, and I felt that was the presence that became my character. I kind of acted out his death.
Uh-huh.
And it was almost like he was in a loincloth. It was like an Indian guru almost. And I didn't know anything about Indian gurus in those days. So
wow, that's cool. Yeah, so you tapped in.
Yeah, so it was, and I think if you go back, because I studied a little bit about ancient theater, early theater, ritual theater, it was often about leading. It was religious. It was sacred drama, the early drama, and it was leading people. When the Greeks talked about the mystery schools of Eleusis, and they had plays of Demeter and Persephone and Hades, they were taking them on a journey to the underworld, and having them experience what your professor did with you, what might happen when you die.
Right.
And the veils, I think, were thinner then. So I think a lot of interesting kind of stuff happened that might have blown people's minds in those experiences. So the kind of theater I love is that. I always had a vision then, and I'm now in my retirement days thankful that I can start to think about how to do sacred drama. And that kind of gets to, what the play that I developed about near-death experiences.
So I'm going to go to the next slide. So now you can share with us what you're doing at the IANDS Conference.
Great.
Coming up on September 3rd.
Great. Yeah. I had this idea, and this was all pre-COVID. As I was getting deep, I was doing hospice work. I was continuing studying the afterlife, and there's so much literature on it. It's endless what you can read and learn about. And I had the idea that some of these stories, especially the near-death experience stories, could make incredible theater, that they are inherently dramatic and profound and deep and moving. And you see videos of people talking about their near-death experiences, and those are very powerful. But I had this sense of what a group of actors could do with some of these stories. So during COVID, I couldn't do any acting classes in person, but there were a couple of acting teachers that did online teaching, and I took some classes. And it was a new technique of acting that I hadn't worked with before, developed by a Russian actor named Michael Chekhov. And they have a school called the Michael Chekhov School of Acting. And these two teachers are in their 80s, and they've done professional acting all over the world, Broadway, touring groups. For 50 years, they've been professional theater people and acting teachers and coaches. So when I was doing the class with them, I was very moved by the exercises they were leading us through. And I was playing around with different ideas I had for scripts, because they always say, we're going to do some exercises, but now have some text ready to read. So I developed some rough text for these plays that I was working with. And I just felt like it was coming alive. So I got together with them and had lunch and said, I have some ideas about doing a play on near-death experiences. And I've started to working on a script. And they both said, Robert, we're in our 80s right now. We're not both in our mid 80s, and we think about this a lot. We think we're coming to the end at some point. So let us know what you have. And so I really worked hard on the script and brought it to them, and they liked it. And then they pulled together a group of actors, and we did a number of readings of the play in their living room, and got feedback, and I revised it and honed it and got it to the point where they agreed, let's start to rehearse it. And we came up with a play. You can go to the next slide. There's a brief description, Kathy. Okay. So what this was, and this is how I imagined it, and this is how they ended up working as an ensemble with the director of the piece guiding us. It's an ensemble theater piece based on true stories of people who've had NDEs, and they follow. And this idea came from Raymond Moody. He talks about near-death experiences are a travel narrative. They describe journeys out of normal consciousness into another realm of consciousness. And so this play starts with the moment of death, quote unquote, where many of these people, these characters, start with being declared clinically dead or having enough of a medical crisis that they're brought to the edge of death, and it tips them over and they leave their bodies. And so that's the beginning of the play. And then it goes through how they cross the veil between life and death and the experiences they've had, the visions of life in the post-mortem realms. And then the play concludes with all of the actors coming back together on stage, almost like a support group, and sharing with each other what happened when they came back from their near-death experience. Wow. And that's if you read the literature, it's not easy for a lot of people. It's not like, oh, I have this profound experience and I'm all set for life. It's, first of all, one character in the play was in a plane crash, and so they were burned on 70% of their body. It took them a year and a half to just be able to function.
Right.
And stuff goes on in your life. Your spouse may not understand what you're talking about, or you may not be clear if what happened to you was real, or you're afraid if you tell somebody, they're going to say you're crazy. And people who actually do say that to loved ones, they often say, I don't want to hear this. This is crazy talk. And so people experience that, and the actors talk about those experiences, as well as how they are trying to live their lives in accordance with what they experienced. And they all, in one way or another, come back knowing that love is the most important thing on the journey of life. And that gets really explained to them in a visceral way that they can't deny. And so that's the gist of the play.
Wonderful.
And it just comes from all the soul work that I've been doing, I think, for my whole life. I had a calling to work on this play, to develop it. And somehow, about synchronicity, Kathy, I'm sure it happens to you and others in this field. The stars lined up, and Ted Pugh is the director of the piece. And he's just an amazing guy. He's just sweet and charming. And he's been doing this for 50 years. He started actually acting in World War II in the Army. He got drafted and didn't particularly want to fight. And he had this talent, and someone picked up on that, and they put him right in the group that was, before the USO happened. They had theater groups performing for the troops. And so Ted's he's been on Broadway, and he's just got amazing stories of his whole acting career. And he actually said that one of the actors that he knew very well, who was an atheist, came up to him one day and just whispered, kind of like the sparkle in his eye, and he said to him, I know that life continues. And he said, what are you talking about? You're an atheist. And he said, no, life continues. I had a near-death experience. And he went on to describe a heart attack in which he left his body. So for Ted, it's a very real thing in his life that he can be helping to dramatically show.
Oh, that's cool.
What's going on with this.
That's cool.
So and one thing, this is thanks for putting this up. Joseph Campbell, who many people have heard of, or maybe even read his book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, was just a brilliant, you'd call him a mythologist. He studied all of the world mythologies and went around the world studying them, and wrote extensively on all the mythological stories that came about. And he ended up coming up with a concept of what he calls a monomyth. It's a myth that happens in all cultures that he labeled the hero's journey. And in simple forms, it's three parts. There's a departure that takes place. It can involve a sense of being called to an adventure. It can also involve, no way, I'm not going. And it can also involve a mentor that is going to take you on a journey. And this is what happens in Dante's Divine Comedy, where he has his mentor comes and takes him on a journey through the purgatory and hell and paradise. But there's some version of this where there's leaving the ordinary world. And in near-death experiences, you leave ordinary consciousness and go to some portion of an unordinary, extraordinary world, which happens to be the post-mortem world. And then you have experiences during that journey. And that's the phase of the hero's journey that's called initiation. It can involve tests. It definitely involves going through a threshold and feeling like you've gone to another place. There can be death, birth ordeals. There could be finding a reward. Sometimes it's called an elixir of medicine, of wisdom. And you have these profound experiences which take place in near-death experiences as well. And then there's a return. And all near-death experiences involve a return in some kind. There's either a willing return where they say, yeah, I need to go back. They need me. I have not finished with the work I have to do. Or more of an involuntary return where in one of the characters, the plays of the play, the uncle shows up in the afterlife and, welcomes the character, and, he meets his uncle and his grandfather, and all these relatives surround him with love. And then they let him know, you can't go any further, that you have to stop here and go back. And so that's when his uncle says, just jump. And he said, it's like jumping into a swimming pool. And then he pushes him and he's back in his body on the operating table. And that's the end of his near-death experience. So that's a little flavor of the play, Kathy. I don't know if we're running out of time.
We are running out of time. I'm sorry to say, because I love what you're doing. And these are the participants that all get to.
Yeah, these are the ensembles. I'll just name them quickly. Vincent Rapolo. I'm in the cast. I play a musician. Desana Smith plays a woman who had multiple near-death experiences as a child. Lori Portocarrero was a gifted storyteller and actress. Eddie Allen, who's a TV actor and stage actor. He's been on Law and Order and all the TV shows. Ted is the next male there. He's the director, Ted Pugh. And then we have two musicians who play lyre music.
Oh.
Sarah and Christina are accomplished lyre musicians. And I always felt this needed music to help tie the pieces of the story together. So they came in, essentially improvised with us, and they provide music in between each of the stories and at the beginning and the end of the piece. So it really creates a tone and a mood of really entering another world. And it's beautiful music.
Wow. So this is going to be amazing. And live performance. I've been to 6 IANDS. I've never seen a live performance like this. So and it's not a workshop. It's a real live performance.
Yeah,
so
it's a performance. Yeah.
Wow.
And then we're going to take a pause after and then talk a little bit about it. And I'll share some of the things that I just shared here today, as well as the actors talking about what it was like to do this play.
Wow. So thank you so much. This has been so informative, and you've really helped us understand and hopefully not be as afraid of death as we have been. And I'd love to have another conversation with you about the soul and personality.
Sure.
And introduce you to some people that it would be fascinating to have the conversation with. Because of their perspective as well. So, but thank you all. If you want to get in touch with Robert, the best way, I think, is his LinkedIn profile. Is that correct?
Sure. Yep.
Right. So, and put it in the comments, and I'll make sure it's up everywhere where you can see. So, and Noel's saying, wow, hope the play is recorded. I'm sure it will be.
Yeah, they're trying to work on that now. We hope so. We'll find out. That would be nice.
Yeah.
Good.
Well,
Kathy,
we try.
Kathy, thanks so much for inviting me. It's great that you're doing this work for the conference.
Yes, thank you. Well, I'm fascinated with it, and honestly, what you'll see when you go to the conference, when you go in person, it creates a field of that remembering of who and what you really are, and that love is just addictive. It's just when you get back to that, that's all you want to be around. So I haven't missed, once I was exposed to it, I haven't missed one. So even online. So anyway, well, thank you, Robert, and I look forward to
thank you. Thank you.
Thank
you. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye. Bye. Thank you, everyone. Please share.